In the heat of a grizzly bear attack, one elk hunter remembers a vital piece of advice his grandmother gave him many years ago. Big animals have big gag reflexes. Shoving his arm down the bear's throat, he just hopes that's not wrong. 26-year-old Chase Dellwo took a hunting trip with his brother on Saturday, October 3, 2015. It was a trip that would change their lives forever. The two of them carried their bows to an area of rugged wilderness northwest of Choteau, Montana. They were on the hunt for elk. The weather was terrible. It was going to be a challenging day, but just how challenging they were about to find out. The wind was blowing 30 to 40 miles per hour. It was driving the rain and snow across the landscape. The visibility was quite poor, and making a successful shot was going to be difficult. But first, the brothers had to find the elk. They hiked through the trees and over the rocky landscape until they came to a ridge. It was the perfect viewing position, and sure enough, down below them there was a herd of elk. They were grazing the grassland along a river drainage system, unaware that the hunters were looking down on them. But there was no way Chase or Shane could make a shot from that distance. So, they came up with a plan. Chase scrambled down the ridge, making his way behind the elk herd. He would then drive them up towards where his brother was lying in wait. There were plenty of fine individuals that would be considered trophy elk, and he was excited about what the day might bring. It was the perfect opportunity for bagging a decent-sized animal. They were horrible conditions to be out and about in, but they also had many benefits. The elk were less likely to see or hear him coming, and they wouldn't pick up his scent either. He clutched his bow by his side. An arrow was nocked, placed on the bowstring, ready to be shot. Then he heard a bull elk bugle. He quickened his pace, hoping to usher the herd towards his brother before they moved off on their own. But unbeknown to him, he was walking towards danger. Something was hidden in the tall grass. As he walked towards the herd, something caught his eye. Suddenly, Chase froze. He had inadvertently walked straight into the path of a sleeping bear. Chase held his breath and immediately backed away. He had walked to within 3 feet of the animal, neither of them aware of the other's presence. The howling wind had silenced Chase's footsteps, and his scent had been blown in the opposite direction. In those heart-pounding seconds, Chase hoped the bear wouldn't wake up. He stepped backwards 3 steps, but to his horror, the bear stirred and opened its eyes. It had smelt Chase and come to its senses. It immediately leapt to its feet and charged at Chase. It was so quick that Chase didn't even have time to draw his bow. He knew the hit was coming and braced himself. The bear struck him like a freight train, and Chase was sent crashing to the cold, wet ground. The wind was knocked from his lungs. The bear pounced on top of the 26-year-old and immediately bit down on his head. Chase could feel the pressure. It felt as though his skull was about to crack. There was nothing he could do. He tried to fight back, but he was pinned to the ground underneath 400 pounds of muscle. The bear let go, but remained standing over the young man. It then let out a roar that shook Chase to the core. Moments later, it stepped away and Chase sat up. But the bear wheeled around and came for him again. Chase was dizzied and dazed from the attack. This time, the bear ran at him with its mouth open. Chase saw the immense, characteristic hump on its shoulder. He saw the shaggy brown fur bouncing on its body as it galloped towards him. Water droplets sprayed from the animal's enormous face. The eyes were fixed on his own. The power of the beast was humbling. Chase had no chance against it. Or did he? As he was being thrown from side to side each time the bear shook its powerful jaws, a memory popped into Chase's head. It was a magazine article that his grandmother had shown him many years ago. It claimed that large animals have big gag reflexes. It was worth a shot. Lying on his back whilst the bear mauled him and shook him, Chase bravely leant forwards and shoved his arm down the bear's throat. The bear immediately let go and reeled backwards. Chase watched as the animal thundered away across the drainage and towards the tree line. Chase could finally breathe. He sat there for a few stunned moments, not quite believing what had happened to him. He wiped his eyes and looked down at his leg. It was torn and in tatters. He had to get out of there and get medical attention right away. He looked towards the ridge for his brother, but he couldn't see him. He had to walk across the uneven ground to find Shane. Every step was now agony. He was battered and bruised, and he didn't know how badly injured he was. It was impossible to tell. But as the pain began intensifying, he began to panic. He stopped, taking deep breaths, trying to calm himself down. He knew panicking was the worst thing he could do in that situation. He had to try and keep his cool, think clearly, and get the help he needed. After trekking along the drainage for some time, he spotted a 6-point elk. That could have been his if he hadn't stumbled upon the bear. But this was no time to be thinking about what might have been. He looked up towards the ridge. There he saw his brother, still crouched in position, waiting for the elk to come his way. Chase raised his bow above his head and waved at Shane. At first, Shane assumed his younger brother had tagged an elk, so he scrambled down the ridge towards him. Only when he got closer did he see Chase's blood-covered face and torn-up leg. He rushed to his side. He immediately checked him over, lifting up his shirt to see if he had any deep lacerations on his torso. When he realized that no arteries had been severed, the two of them rushed to their vehicle. Shane took the wheel and raced along the tracks to the open road. Benefice Teton Medical Center was 20 minutes drive away, and Shane pushed the pedal to the floor, knowing that every minute counted. He phoned ahead, and when they arrived, staff were waiting for them. They immediately got to work on Chase. He was pumped full of antibiotics to stave off any potential infection. He received staples and stitches to his head and face. His left eye was swollen, and his leg bore deep puncture wounds which would take time to heal. Chase knew he wouldn't have had time to dispense bear spray if he had been carrying it, and he doubted whether it would have been effective in such strong wind either. But he still advises others to carry bear spray with them when they are heading out into the wilderness, something he will be doing next time he is out. Chase held no grudge against the bear. He knew that the bear was just as afraid and just as startled as he was. And it could have ended him then and there, but it didn't. It had no desire to kill him, only to neutralize the threat. Chase sat out the rest of the bow hunting season that year, but with hunting in his blood, he knew he'd be back the following season. Owen Miller is a hunting specialist. His weapon of choice is more unique than others. He started off hunting with his rifle, then he turned to a compound bow, and then he found his ultimate challenge, using a recurve bow. There was something about a recurve bow that excited Owen. It made the hunt harder and more challenging. It was a more traditional way of hunting. It requires more skill, depending on who you ask, and means you have to get a lot closer to the animal for the perfect shot. The challenge of a recurve bow comes with its more primal setup. It doesn't have sights, and it also doesn't have a compound bow's pulley system. This system allows a bow hunter to pull the string back and hold it for a prolonged period of time before releasing the arrow. This means that you can ready the bow, aim at the target, and only then release the arrow. But for recurve bows, it's more simply a case of drawing and shooting in one single motion. There is no room for error. But Owen's fussiness over his specific weapon of choice doesn't end there. He is also picky about the arrows he uses. He doesn't like the modern ones that have 4 or more cutting blades. He doesn't think they look traditional. So instead, he opts for arrows with triangle-shaped broadheads with 2 cutting edges. Using this more traditional hunting weapon and technique, Owen had to practice a lot. In fact, it took him more than 2 years before he felt confident enough to use the recurve bow on a real hunt. Teaching himself exactly when to pull back the string and his positioning for the perfect shot was an art form. Owen was no stranger to hunting. He had made many kills before. He had taken down bears, elk, and mule and white-tailed deer. For these he had used his rifle or compound bow. For Owen, It was always about the thrill of the hunt, not about the size of the animal or the big trophy hunts. He just wanted to be in the great outdoors, seeking adventure. But there was a beast in his favorite hunting ground in southern Wyoming. It was almost of mythical proportions. It was a cinnamon-colored male black bear, and it was huge. Owen and his brother had seen it on a number of hunting trips, but they had always failed to shoot it. Somehow, it always evaded capture. It was like a ghost amongst the trees, disappearing from the sights, slinking away into the bushes before either of them could secure a shot. They would just catch a glimpse of it before it vanished for the rest of the hunting season. In the fall of 2023, Owen's brother stood patiently in a stand waiting for the mysterious bear to make an appearance. When he saw a head emerging from the undergrowth, he pulled his trigger, but it wasn't the cinnamon-colored bear he had hoped for, and the brothers couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. They would have to wait until the spring hunting season for their next shot at the elusive beast. Towards the end of May, Owen had a wedding to attend near his favorite hunting ground. He decided to combine a hunting trip whilst he was in the area. He baited the ground near a hunting stand before attending the wedding. When he came back, all the bait had been taken, so he resupplied it. Then he waited in the stand with his trusty recurve bow. It wasn't long before he heard a rustle in the surrounding undergrowth. Something beige appeared below him. He knew it wasn't a bear right away, and so grabbed his camera instead of his bow. To his surprise, it was a mountain lion. Owen didn't know what it was going to do. He wasn't far off the ground, and if the mountain lion decided to attack, he could be in trouble. But it walked right underneath him without glancing up. Owen held his breath as he watched the big cat sniff the ground where the bait lay and then disappear off into the distance. It was an incredible encounter that had made the wait worth it. Owen would have been happy if his hunting trip had ended there. But he was in for yet another surprise, one he had been waiting many years for. Owen wasn't expecting to see any bears that day. He had disturbed the bait, resupplied it, and hadn't long been in the tree stand. He knew from experience that usually it took bears a good few days to return to a disturbed spot. But he decided to wait a little longer to see if anything showed up. Then, at around 7 p.m., he saw it. The cinnamon-colored black bear. It was an incredible specimen, and it was completely unaware of Owen's presence. It must have determined that there was no danger and come to investigate. Owen couldn't believe his eyes. He wished his brother there with him now to witness the spectacle. It was tempting to take the shot right away. He had waited so long for this moment, but it had to be right. He couldn't risk injuring the bear and letting it get away. Patience was key with recurve bow hunting. He knew with the recurve bow, the positioning had to be perfect straight away. And so, he waited a little longer. He silently picked up his bow, ready to make the shot. Then, the bear walked a little closer to the stand, lifted his head, and stared up at Owen. Their eyes met briefly, and Owen knew that this was his chance. In an instant, he drew the bow and let it go in one swift movement. The shot was as perfect as they come. The arrow struck the bear side on and pierced both lungs. It was a powerful and immediately fatal shot, and the bear was dead within seconds. Owen had done it. He had taken the cinnamon-colored black bear he had wanted for so long, and he had used his recurve bow. It could not have been a more perfect hunt. His patience had paid off, and the last 2 years of mastering the recurve bow was worth it. The sun had now set in the sky, and the forest was cloaked in darkness. Owen had to be quick to process the carcass, but the bear must have weighed around 400 pounds. It was a huge job for one person, and it was around 1:30 in the morning before he hauled the first load of meat to his truck. Under Wyoming hunting regulations, black bears are classified as a trophy game species, which means that hunters aren't required to keep the meat. But Owen didn't agree with that. If you are going to take the life of an animal, you should make the most of it. He loved bear meat and intended to use as much as possible. He rendered down the fat for cooking oil and to use as waterproofing for hiking boots. When Owen hauled the skin and skull of the bear back home, his friends couldn't believe just how massive the bear had been. They were sure that Owen had set some kind of record, but Owen has always been reluctant to chase records and make trophy shots. That's not why he hunts. But after a lot of persuasion from his friends, he considered getting the bear measured officially by a certified Boone and Crockett score. Even though he had already processed the bear and waited a long time before considering getting the bear scored, he hadn't lost his chance. Because the official scoring is done by measuring the bear's skull, and that can only be done once it's gone through the mandatory drying period. This meant that Owen could still have a record-winning bear on his hands. Although the size of the animal was not Owen's goal, he couldn't help but wonder exactly how big his bear was compared to others that had been harvested. So he unofficially measured the skull himself, and it came out at 21 1/16 inches, which would mean that it's the 8th largest black bear ever taken in the state of Wyoming. What's your opinion on hunting with a bow? Please share your comments below. Thank you for watching and stay safe.